I love Stephen King. He is my favorite author, and I knew Josh, and I knew that he liked King. And I was like, I bet if I made this a project, I could force Josh to talk about this book with me.
Don't start a podcast. Just listen to mine, and that's all you need to do. Don't worry about it.
We've had tense moments on the podcast just because it's Stephen King. Sometimes we're covering material that is very relevant for today, unfortunately, in some cases, and is very scary and very real.
My co-host and I met Ben in college. We were both in the theater department, and we got cast in the same play. And Ben was my understudy.
And I hated him.
I get it. I'm a lot.
But eventually, we started doing comedy together. Eventually, we became friends. When I approached him to do the podcast, he was like, this sounds great. Hey, there's someone we should talk to.
Because I have a very normal and reasonable number of Stephen King books.
Because she's a crazy person and loves King more than us.
I met Josh in 2014 on the set of a movie that we were both in, and we just met. We didn't hit it off or anything or hang out. He actually became friends with my husband.
And him and I really hit it off, so we started hanging out, and I think maybe the first or second time I met CM, it was at their house, and I think I said something about Stephen King, and she was like, do you like Stephen King? And I was like, yeah. And she dragged me into her office, which is now our studio, to show me her collection of the first editions and gift editions. When Ben brought the idea of doing a Stephen King podcast up, I was like, this sounds like an insane amount of fun. Yes, I'm all in. Let's do it.
I don't know that it was a conscious decision to start a podcast as it was a decision to try and trick a friend into sharing an interest.
When I'm preparing for our episodes, I usually read or listen to the audio version of the book. And sometimes I do that a couple times just to make sure that I don't miss anything interesting and catch all of the nuance of the book that I usually miss the first 2 or 3 times reading through.
To prepare for each episode, I not only read the sections we're covering for the episode, but I pull a quote to use for the ending line, and I write all of the fake news intros that start all of the episodes.
I know that I'm sure you asked Josh and CM this question, and their answers are probably, especially CM, very in-depth. I read the book and show up.
I was 12 or 13 years old, and I was flying to my brother's wedding. I was with my mom and grandma, and they're both very lovely, but I was a teenager, so I was like, stopped in the gift shop in the airport, and just picked up the first book that I saw, which happened to be Stephen King's Rose Madder, and read that on the way there. And it's such a dark book for a teen girl to be reading. I've read it 3 or 4 times since then, and I remember reading it as a teenager, and I was astonished when the book takes a turn that was my moment for me where I realized, oh, books can do this. Books can do different, interesting things, and it kind of blew me away.
My favorite work by Stephen King is also the first Stephen King book I ever read, it turns out. It's the book Needful Things. And I love that book so much that I had CM write this for me. It is a plot in the Book of Needful Things, and I had CM write on it, "To my good friend Brian, best wishes, Sanford Koufax," which is exactly what it says in the book when he reads it. And it belongs on my shelf with all of my Stephen King collectibles. It's my favorite thing.
When I was younger, I would have said The Stand. A few years ago, I would have said, or a year or so ago, I probably would have said Pet Sematary. Right now, we just started reading The Shining, which I've not read since high school, and right now I'd probably say The Shining.
I was too ignorant about everything that was going to happen to us and all the work it was going to take to have any fear or doubt about what we were doing. I just said yes, and then decided that I would deal with the consequences.
I just don't stick around doing projects for that long. I get bored of things very easily, which is a testament to how great and how much I love doing this podcast that it has been 4 years, and I am excited every time I get to come in and record.
absolutely had doubts when we started this thing. We've said before that if it weren't for CM and the work that she does doing all the editing and making our show sound the way it sounds, there is a high chance our show wouldn't have lasted a year.
I am constantly surprised every time we read a book, even if it's one that I'm already familiar with. Reading for pleasure and reading critically for what we do is a completely different experience. So I guess my surprise is just that the experience itself is so much more unique than I anticipated.
A lot of the conversations that we've had have ended up changing how I feel about some of these books and certain scenes and stuff like that. But the one that really hits me the most was when we covered Pet Sematary. That whole story is about grief. While I'm reading and discussing this book where, family loses a member, I was experiencing that in real life. And through being there for them and reading Louis Creed talk about his grief and really explore it, it gave me an understanding I didn't have before, and it really helped me be there for my family, and it also helped me kind of grieve in my own way in public on the show.
If I could tell myself something 4 years ago, go to therapy. It doesn't have anything to do with the podcast, but if I'm getting this opportunity...
If I could give myself a piece of advice when I was just starting this out, I think it would be to believe in yourself more. I held back, like going all in, spending money on equipment or updating a website or things like that. Things that I spend money on now, and gladly because they work. If I could go back, I'd double down on how much I knew this would succeed in my heart.
I'd just tell myself to calm down. I would keep everything the same, just my stress level, maybe take that down a little bit.
5 years from now, I'd like to still be doing something Derry. I really want to start doing, in the near future, more kind of video content.
I'd really love to do more live shows. I think conventions are fun, and it's a nice way to connect with other horror fans and like-minded people.
I don't think ahead in general as a person.
Also, having a show called Derry Public Radio is really funny for people who don't listen to or read Stephen King because they think Derry and Derry, which reminds me of this really funny story. We talked about a cheese pot. Is that too much? Is that should I go? I'm gonna go.